Test. Testing 1, 2. All right. All right. All right. Good morning, everybody. So, bear with us today. We've done some work on the PA system, and it could be giving us some fits today. I'm just telling you. But hopefully, everybody will be able to hear. You could turn me down just a hair. The monitors, we got monitors now working, so there's a lot more sound up here. Does it sound like there's more sound? And like an echo chamber? That's all right. I just want everybody to be able to hear. Some folks have been telling me they haven't been able to hear very well, so that's good. But some of our mics, our choir mics and stuff, will be able to pick up today and stuff. I'm excited about that. They've been dead for a while. So anyway, we are on lesson 13. I want you to turn back, if you would, to Isaiah 32. I don't have this on my notes, but Isaiah 32 is where we want to start today. Isaiah 32. And I want to look at verse 20. Yeah, verse 20. Isaiah 32, verse 20. Look what it says here. Blessed are ye that sow beside all waters, that send forth thither the feet of the ox and the ass. Blessed are ye that sow beside all waters. Can you see the parallel to that verse and what we've been talking about in Sunday school about witnessing for Christ? Sow beside all waters. Every area you can think of, you sow in that area. So we talk about this. I've talked about this several times, but remember that every culture has subcultures. Every culture. Every community has subcultures. People talk amongst their friends and they have relationships amongst their friends. Every culture has its own subculture. And when I say subculture, I don't mean a subpar culture. I mean a different group, people that hang out, people that connect, every area. You're going to find out that there's networks throughout your community. Community networks. Does that make sense? And those community networks oftentimes do not mix. They don't mingle. You'll have the politics. You'll have the political networks. You'll have the service networks. You'll have the education networks. You'll have the business community networks. You'll have the police networks, the fire networks. You'll have you'll have the hospital, the medical. You have subcultures within the medical, because there's like 3,000 employees at Sarah Bush. So you have you have all the different, buildings and things. It's like, Patty, you work in one of the buildings out there, don't you? Which building do you work in? In number 1? So number 1 and number 2 don't usually connect, do they? It's like you don't usually do much with a hospital. It's like you all have your own little worlds. And it's that's how it works. Now, it's important to understand that, because if you want to reach your community as a pastor, from a pastor's perspective, if I want to reach my community, I have to find all these subcultures to try to reach these people. Now, what used to be, how many of you guys have ever been in a door-to-door visitation program? How many of you have ever been in that? Okay, so in the 70s, that was really considered popular. I mean, that was a big deal. People would go door to door, 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s. They were still doing it. Some communities and some cultures, they still do that. In fact, I think door to door works really good when you're doing when you're picking up kids in a bus, and that's door to door works really good that way. But in our community, I've talked to several guys who've pastored here and so on, and many of the churches, and some of you guys have done it. They've told me they've knocked on every door in Mattoon multiple times, and it hasn't brought much results. What I found is by going to the ponds, going to the different subcultures and finding a way to communicate in the different subcultures, that is more effective. Now, here's the funny thing. You guys are all involved in your own subcultures. You all have your groups that you work with, okay? Now, I want you to think about that. You think about the people that you connect with, the people that you have relationships with, and you think about your responsibility to those groups. You're supposed to be reaching that world. Now, let's say, John, how long have you worked at Just Right? 17 years? And you work a night shift, right? So pretty much, I know you, pretty much you've talked about everybody on your night shift, right? I mean, John's always telling me about conversations he has with his coworkers and things, and I know he's a witness on his job. What happens when you run out of people to talk to in your job? So, well, I've talked to everybody. I've talked to all my neighbors. I've talked to everybody in my job. What do I do? How do I reach more people? Because you're going to find out something. You're going to find out every pond only has so many fish. Right? And there's only so many that'll get on your hook. And then you're done, right? So what do? Change jobs? Not necessarily. Some people do it that way, honestly. There may be one person at Just Right that John can reach. Kim was telling me a couple weeks ago, a couple of his coworkers accepted Christ, him and Donna, down there at the print shop, right? Is that right, Kim? A couple of your coworkers accepted Christ? You've been witnessing to them, and what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? Okay. How long have you worked at that place, that print shop? How long have you worked there? Have you worked? So you've worked there 32 years. How many people in 32 years have you seen come to Christ at your workplace? 4 or 5. So in 32 years at his workplace, he's seen 4 or 5 come to Christ. That's wonderful, isn't it? That's great. But think about this. Only 4 or 5 in 32 years at one place. Right? So if you want to reach people, you have to find places outside of your comfort zone necessarily. You've got to look for these other waters. Blessed are they that sow by other waters. So, class participation here. Help me think about this. Where else would somebody who works 9 to 5 or 5 to 9 or whatever, when this is your area, like Monica, you're coming now to the school, so you're at the school. I mean, you know, if you could get Jim Peretti saved, that'd be wonderful. But, I mean, seriously, how many times can you get him saved? I mean, really. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like when you have these cultures, you're within those cultures and you testify, you reach out to them, you witness to them, and then you've run out of people to talk to, the pond is empty. Now what do? Are you supposed to continue to reach out? Yes. So, where do you find these places? Josh, how long do you work where you work? 18 years. And you work nights too, don't you? No. Not anymore? I have. Praise the Lord, right? Happy dance. Now it's day shift. Good for you. So, and some people like night shift. I know John likes night shift, don't you? Some people are geared for that, and I'm glad you're on day shift now. The thing is, you've worked there that long. You go home, you're tired. And the preacher, you come to church, and the preacher says you're supposed to be reaching people for Christ, and your immediate thought is, I've already talked to everybody. I already talked to everybody that'll talk to me. I've already done everything I know to do. And Jimmy's still a jerk. Hasn't got saved. You know what I'm saying? So, do you have a responsibility to reach people out of your comfort zone? Yes. How would you do that? Aside from the church visitation program where you could come on Thursday night and eat up time where you're already tired and you want to be home with your family. And so you come and you hope that nobody answers the door and that maybe you and the preacher can have donuts and coffee somewhere at some restaurant, and we'll call that visitation. I know that happens, doesn't it? Okay? Anybody gonna help me here? Okay, think about, here's what we're gonna do. See, because no one here is jumping to answer this question, it tells me something. It tells me that if we're going to activate this crowd, we have to treat this problem before we go any farther. We have to think, where can I reach people? Now for me, because I'm a pastor, that's my job. I'm always hunting, okay? I'm hunting for new circles, new areas. That's what I'm doing. But when you're working the job you're working, that's not what you're doing all the time. But as a Christian, you are responsible to sow by all waters and to reach people. So how are you going to do that? Who are you going to look? Here's what you got to do. First thing we got to do, start thinking about your circles of influence. Okay? So we started with your job, the people you work with. What's another area that you could work on? Huh? Family. Okay. There's the key. Start relationships in all the places you go. Keep in mind that what you're looking for is to build relationships. He that asks friends must show himself friendly. So it's not as hard as you think. Say, okay, we're going to drive through the drive-through and this person's got to get saved today. Baptized, whatever. That's not how it works, right? It takes time and it takes cultivating relationships, right, over time. And those are places you go. I know Mrs. Mrs. Amstutz, she and her husband would go to McDonald's every, how often through the week, and they would always give a gospel tract to the girl in the window. And one day they came in and told me that the girl in the window had read the gospel tract and accepted Christ. That's a blessing. Go ahead. She would give tracts at Aldi's. And is that Brandy? Yeah. The gospel tract, which we have back there on the rack right there. Their little message has the name of our church on it, and then there's some. If you go around the corner, there's some in a rack back there. You can take some of those, and you can, when you're at a restaurant, put your tip inside of it. If you got cash, leave it on the table. Let them look at it. That's some way to do it. Now, gospel tracts are effective if you just leave it and walk away and no one ever sees you again, and that's an easy way to leave a witness. But it's more effective if you're building a relationship with someone and they like who you are and you like them, and 2 or 3 times into your relationship building, about the third or fourth time into it, you give them a gospel tract and ask them to read it and tell them, this is something really important to me. I want you to read this. Then go back and ask them if they read it and ask them what they think about it. you will offer, there's an opportunity to have a conversation. Jeff? Pens. Okay. So your church pens. Jeff likes to do that. And it's a good way of outreach. Those church pens have our church information on it. On the website, there's a gospel message they can read. There's a couple of them on there. They can go to that website. Hey, here's a pen from my church. A lot of times I'll give somebody a pen and I'll say, well, I'll just keep the pen. And then later, they'll look at the information. How else? How else can you reach out? What other areas could you get to? So we've talked about job, we've talked about family, we've talked about interacting with, connections that you make. Yes. What's that? That's correct. Neighbors. Neighbors is a good way. Looking at your neighbors and being able to build relationships with your neighbors. Brittany was my neighbor for a while, right? Mom and Dad still are. And we've built relationships with her family, and that's really neat. It's been fun. I mean, we had a fun July 4th, didn't we? But the neighbors is important. Relationship with folks around you. And by the way, might I say that this is important. This is a reason why you should cut your lawn and trim your hedges. Because if your lawn is overgrown and looks like you could lose tennis balls in it, your neighbors are not going to be encouraged. It's why you don't have neighbors. Yes, okay, because you can lose tennis balls in your yard. You live out in the country, right? That's basketballs lost in your yard. Gotcha. Okay, so I understand. Country living's wonderful, isn't it? Okay. What else?
It's easy to witness to people who are in difficult situations, like
rehabs, jails, on their deathbed. Folks want to talk about that. Funerals, they want to talk about the Lord. They want to talk about it when they're in the hospital. Some of you that are retired and you don't have anything really on your schedule except grandkids. I want you to think about this. You don't have the same schedule you used to keep. Unless you hang around us, right, Mrs. Purdy, and then we put you back to work. But the truth is that when you don't have a schedule like that, have you ever thought about doing something like visiting at the hospital? Or visiting widows or shut-ins? I know, Lana, you do some of that. You were with hospice. You work with hospice a bit. You're assigned individuals to go visit at hospice. There's a stack of papers on the Welcome Center back there. That's from the Council on Aging. And if you're interested, I would go back and look through there. There's actually groups, listen to this, at the Council on Aging, which is behind the hospital. They have groups for grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. We have some of those in our church. The grandparents are raising the grandkids. They have groups. So you can go to these groups and you can meet people that are going through the same thing you might be going through. There are groups for folks that are taking care of Alzheimer's patients or dementia patients. You say, well, I don't need that group. I got God with me. Yeah, but there might be somebody in that group that needs you. That make sense? Those are places you can look and think about, where can I go? to meet people. Right. Well, she's saying, if you can't hear her, she's saying she's been a caregiver, for 13 years? And it's easy to have these conversations when you're caring for them. It's easy. It just kind of just naturally happens. Here's what I've noticed. I've noticed that our culture, our society, is pretty selfish. Now, I've been preaching about that a lot. But I'm honestly, you think about it, we are pretty much into our own lives and our own comfort and getting home to our own easy chair with our own remote and whatever, or our own Facebook or our own phone or our own whatever we do. I mean, anything I mention, somebody in here probably doesn't do it, so that's fine. But whatever it is you do, your own tinkering, your own playing around your garage, your own, mechanic stuff, or your woodworking, or whatever you do. You get wrapped up in your own personal life, your own world. And that's why you don't reach anyone. You say, well, I'm backwards, I'm shy. Well, no, you're not. You're not as shy as you think you are. You're telling yourself you're shy. You're telling yourself you're backwards, and the devil's doing the same thing. Remember Paul? He said, pray for me that I will have boldness. So this boldness is something that comes from God. Moses. Remember Moses? He said, Lord, I can't talk to anybody. I can't talk to Pharaoh. I've got a stammering tongue. Well, if I was a stammerer, I would have trouble too. And so God said, I made the tongue. I gave you the job. Are you listening? I don't mean to be harsh. There's a lot of people in here that struggle with anxiety. Believe it or not, this guy right here. I've struggled with years and years and years trying to talk to people about the Lord, getting nervous. I used to tell a story about this guy, and I could relate to it. So this barber, he worked, in his barber shop, and it was back in the days when you'd use a straight razor, and he would shave people and so on. Well, he was going to a revival meeting, and the preacher was getting on him about, like preachers do, getting on him about reaching out, preaching to people outside of your comfort zone. And so Monday night, he determined he was going to talk to someone that came in to work with him at the barber shop that he was supposed to work with. Monday came and went back to the revival meeting Monday night, and he gets convicted again. I didn't say anything. Tuesday goes, Wednesday, Thursday, finally on Friday, he gets almost to closing time, and he's like, I want to talk to somebody. I know I should. I know it's wrong for me not to, but I don't know. I'm just nervous. And so this guy's tipped back in his chair, and he's got his face all lathered up. He's getting ready to shave him, and he walks over there with a straight razor, and he's, sharpening it up, getting it really sharp, and he says, gonna do it. The guy can hear him. Gonna do it. And he walks over and he leans over this guy, and sweat is coming off of his brow, and his eyes are a little bugged out because he's nervous as all get out. He's got this straight razor in his hand, and his knuckles are white. And he looks at him and he says, are you prepared to die? Well, I get the point. Are you ready? If you died, would you go to heaven? That's what he meant at. But the guy in the chair did not respond to that type of evangelism. He got up and ran out. I don't know if anybody ever been there where you've been nervous and you knew you were supposed to say something and you didn't, and you said the wrong thing. Anybody else besides me? Happens. All the time. So Paul prayed for boldness, that God would give him boldness. Now, Moses did the same thing. Moses is speaking before Pharaoh, ends up talking to 2 million people that wanted to stone him, and he told them to back down. I mean, courage. Paul stands on the ship in the old time there in Acts 28. There's a storm coming, and the ship is gonna break up. And Paul looks at them and he says, "You should have listened to me. You know, this is a guy that was saying, pray for me that I'll have boldness. Huh? So, you know, it's a problem all of us have. But just because you're nervous or shy does not abdicate your responsibility. You've got to find a way to witness for Christ. If that way is putting a gospel tract in an envelope and sending it to your neighbors, start somewhere. If it's giving a tract to someone and you're so nervous you can't say anything, if it's leaving a tract on your table when you leave with a $10 bill in it or something for your waitress, leaving it on your table and walking away, and you're too nervous to talk, at least do that. You got what I'm saying? Get outside. Get outside. Stop thinking about me and start looking for an opportunity to witness for Christ. Why is that important? I saw a picture someone put on Facebook this week of a guy, a Christian man, with his arms around someone who had psychedelic hair and rainbow tattoos and whatever. And he said to this person, I care. I don't want you to go to hell. That's why I'm talking to you. You know? An atheist this week said something like this. He said, I like Judaism and I like Buddha. No, he said Buddha. I said, I like the Buddha faith because it does not proselytize. In other words, leave me alone. Stop messing with my conscience is what he's telling you. Don't confront me. You know, so he likes the Buddha religion because Buddha doesn't proselytize. And he doesn't like Christians because we're always in people's faces trying to keep them from burning. And the devil spins that to make it look like we hate people. And we don't hate people. I care. I care about these people who are confused and lost and totally messed up in the head. I care about them. But sometimes we don't come across like that. We come across like, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm going to heaven, you're going to hell, sorry about that. My family's put together, yours isn't, big deal. If you knew the pain and the hurts that are in our community and the people that you could reach, you'd be shocked. And the only way you're going to find that is if you start looking for it. Blessed are they that sow by all waters. I got a call this week that one of our hospital employees, I'll just say it that way, this person has certifications and stuff like that you would think they have their life all put together. This young lady's been living in her car in the park. So we've arranged, our church is helping her stay. We have a little bit of a fund that we have. It's getting low, so if anyone wants to put any money into it, that'd be good because we're going to need it. A fund to help in a situation like that. Try to help her get to, she's got a week or two before she can get into her apartment that she's got, but she's been living in her car, and we just found out about that. Like, I walk into the hospital almost every day. I've seen her, talked to her in the hallway, and had no idea she was living in her car. There's people like that all over our community that are hurting and need help, and we've got to look outside of ourselves, look outside of our world, and see if we can help. How can we help? All right. So beside all waters. Are you getting the point here? You getting what we're trying to drive at? Now let's go into the lesson sheet that I gave you here today. determining which factor. We talked about all the different factors. We were looking at different factors last week about generations, about occupations, and all those different things, right? How are you going to determine which factor applies? How are you going to know who you're talking to? And here are some things, some guidelines, okay? So when you don't know, you don't know this person is living on the street. You have no idea. The person you're talking to, you have no idea. I walked into Walmart one day, and I said to the lady, she was standing there, and she looked like her face was like she was having a bad day. And I said to her, "Was everything going okay?" And she's like, "No, actually, my house burned down last night." I said, "What are you doing at work?" So, well, I didn't have anywhere else to go. I mean, she's standing behind the cash register, checking people out, and you're like, man, hurry up. You know, that's your attitude, right? Come on, I'm in a hurry to get somewhere. And she's dealing with this issue, and I stopped and had prayer with her, and she teared up. Okay, so you don't know. How do you find out how to reach these people? How do you find this out? Well, you open a conversation. After your conversation is open, try to get your friend, and I use the word friend because it's the person you're talking to. You're befriending. He that hath friends must show himself friendly. So you are the one showing yourself friendly, right? You ask in a conversation, what does he believe about life, about death? Does he believe the Bible is true? Is he concerned about his own need? I'm going to tell you this, one of the easiest conversations in this area to have, and I honestly have never done this before I moved here, because in this area, it's been true. I will ask them, where do you go to church? Do you go to church? Do you have a church home? That's one of the conversation openers I have when I'm trying to get into the conversation of religion. Because when I moved here 10 years ago, 86% of Mattoon had no church affiliation, did not go to church anywhere. 86%. That's really large. So that's a lot of people don't go to church or have any church affiliation. So I can ask them, do you have a church affiliation? That immediately starts the conversation, in the direction I want it to go. In other places I've lived or worked, it seemed like everybody went to church, but not here, and so that's an easy opening. You can ask, what do you believe about life after death? If you're talking to somebody, do you believe there's life after death? What do you believe? Ask questions. Listen closely. Don't be so anxious to tell what you think as you are to hear what this person thinks. You want to have a conversation with someone about the Lord? The best thing to do is to get them to talk about themselves. Does that make sense? And that is easier. Your job is not to force Jesus down their throats. Jesus is a gentleman, right? He offers himself. He does not force himself. So you want them to talk about themselves. I've mentioned this Hindu doctor that I have made friends with. He started introducing me to different people in the hallway. This is my friend, and we talk a lot. But I'll be honest with you, 90% of the conversation at this point is from him. I ask him questions. Tell me about the Hindu faith. And he started finding similarities between what he believes and what I believe. That's interesting. I've never had that happen before. You say, well, how do you talk to a Hindu? You ask them questions. You don't talk at them. You listen. You get them to talk to you. Does that make sense? And as they talk to you, they warm up. And when they realize that they've got the opportunity to say everything they wanted to say, they'll give you the opportunity to speak. Listen closely. Number 3, don't always try to correct the wrong ideas. Your job is not always to correct every little detail. Oh, that's a mess. I've been with guys that are trying to win souls, and they're like, oh, stop, let's fix that one, and then let's fix this one, and let's fix this one. And it does not matter. It matters what Bible you use, okay? But that's not a conversation you have to have on the street. Right? Don't try to fix everybody's Bible they're coming, Don't try to fix it all. I've had conversations with Jehovah's Witnesses. They use a New World Translation of the Scriptures. Now, that's very similar to the NIV. They will be shocked, but it is. It's almost like the NIV. It's just got added a whole bunch of Jehovah's in there. And they will try to criticize your King James Bible because they say the personal name of God is not in there. And it's okay to, and I've learned a lot about Jehovah's Witnesses. You know how? By asking them questions, listening to what they have to say, rather than me trying to tell them what they believe. So what do you actually believe? I found out a lot of things about Muslims by listening to them, letting them talk to me and tell me things. You don't always try to correct all their wrong ideas when you're having conversation. That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to bring them to Christ. So what if so I believe in a young earth. Okay, that's what I believe. I believe that God created things as they are. I think Adam was not made a baby. I think Adam was made an adult. So I think what I believe is God created things with apparent age. That's what I think. Okay? Now, is that a conversation I want to have with someone while we're talking about Jesus? Do I want to debate evolution with them? Yes or no? No. Is it important for them to believe or disbelieve in evolution? Is it important for them to believe in a worldwide flood or a local flood or a flood at all? No. Later, as we understand the Bible, we learn more about God, we understand how God does things, our positions are important. But at the point of salvation, all of those issues are not important at all. So don't try to correct them all. Stick to the point. Throughout the conversation, hold before your friend this question: how are you going to get rid of your sins? Don't let them lead you off track. The Samaritan woman tried to sidetrack Jesus by first raising a racial question, then a physical problem, then a social situation, and from there a church problem. It's like, okay, let's push all that aside. Now let's talk back to you. Okay, those are those people, but this is me and you. All right? Look carefully for hunger in the life of this person. Aaron brought this out a minute ago. People that are in trouble, that are hurting, close to death. They need something. Do you know what I found out? People that are hungry are people that are starving, people that don't have something. But if they're full and satisfied and content with their life, you're not going to get anywhere with them because they think they got it all figured out. Have you noticed that? It's almost like they have to come to a place of brokenness most of the time for them to turn to God. The Proverbs 27:7 says, the full soul loatheth an honeycomb. In other words, someone that's full, you don't want any more. Have you ever had so much sweet stuff that you couldn't have another thing? Have you ever been so full? When I go grocery shopping, I prefer eating first. Because if I go hungry, I'm going to buy more stuff than I should. Right? The full soul loatheth the honeycomb. It's a honeycomb and it's wonderful. It tastes good. It's wonderful to have it. But if you're already full, you don't want it. Okay? Be careful of that. Look for someone who's hungry. If they're not hungry, walk away and find someone else. They'll get hungry at another point. Care must be taken in dealing with educated people. It's easy to teach the facts of the gospel, but it's not the facts that save. It's only the revelation of Jesus Christ to the soul that saves. Just remember, even an intelligent person has a God consciousness. An atheist, there's a famous Hollywood person right now that is calling agnostics cowardly atheists. He's calling them cowards. Because he said, if you're an atheist, you've got courage. My question to him is, how? Why do you need courage if there's no God? Why do you need courage to say there's no God if there's no God? That's my question. Does that make sense? Say, why are you saying, and if I had a chance to talk to him, that's the question I would ask him. If you're an agnostic, He said, you don't have enough courage. An agnostic is someone who says, I don't know whether there's a God or not. He said, well, just go full on. Be an atheist. Be courageous. No. Why is he saying that? Because inside of him, there's that God consciousness that he's fighting against. He knows there's a God in his soul. Boy, that's good information to have when you're talking to people. Don't use questions that can be answered easily. Ask questions that will cause the subject to do some explaining. Then you'll know the true condition of their heart. And I want to say this as well. You also get them to think. Okay? You want to ask questions that cause them to think. Right? Because when they walk away from the conversation, you want that thing, whatever you said, to be rolling in their head. I don't know the answer to that. Huh? That's another thing that brings a hunger. They want to know the answer. Number 8, don't allow your friend to get away with making general statements about spiritual matters. If he says, I don't believe the Bible, pinpoint that disbelief. Pinpoint. So what don't you believe? And ask him questions about certain verses. Ecclesiastes 1:7. Okay, so this is fun. I like doing this. I collect questions like this 4 times like this. Ecclesiastes. Let me read it to you. Chapter 1, verse 7. Here's what it says. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. Okay, so it was a basic scientific question. Rivers run into the sea isn't full. Do you believe, is that true? That's in the Bible. Do you believe that or not? When you say, I don't believe the Bible, which part don't you believe? There's lots of things. There's a time for everything, and everything is time. In our culture, in our society, we use Bible phrases in our culture, and people just quote them and use them and practice them, and don't even think about it being the Bible. Proverbs has all kinds of. You want to find stuff. Proverbs about living life and finances and that kind of thing. There's all kinds of good stuff in there. Say, what part don't you believe? And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. I knew that thing about David and Bathsheba was in there. Okay. But what about this thing? Did you know this was there? Do you believe that or don't you? Let's see here. Here's one. Hast thou found honey? Eat so much as is sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith and vomit it. I did this, a chapel lesson on this once. Oh, it was fun. It's fun to talk to teens about vomit. But hast thou found honey? Eat so much as is sufficient for thee. In other words, eat how much is good for you. But if you eat more than you should eat, you'll get sick. That's in the Bible. Do you believe that? You see what I'm saying? You pin them down. Oftentimes I've had people tell me they don't understand the King James Version. And I'll use that same technique. I'll pick out a verse. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. And I'll say, what don't you understand about that? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. What don't you understand about that? Huh? Tell me. People make general statements. Don't let them get by with that. And find verses that people can agree with. While you're doing your Bible study, mark them in your Bible. You run across something that people can agree with, mark them in your Bible. Well, I got to remember that verse. I'm going to come back to that. One question to be asked is, what would God have to do to prove to you that he exists and his promises are true? and show them proofs in the Bible. If your friend tries to argue, try to find some way you can agree with them. Take the teeth out of his argument. That's one of the last things I want to tell you. This is this is called de-escalation when we talk about, when we do like, I'm trying to think of the term, I'm drawing a blank. When we have a situation, when I was a police chaplain in Indiana, we would have these situations where somebody would have a gun or a knife, or we would have to talk them down, try to get them to give it up or to surrender. Negotiation, a negotiator will always try to find some way to agree, a connecting point. Okay? So if someone says to you, I don't know whether there is a God or not, is that a good statement or not? Is that an easy statement? Have you ever doubted the existence of God? You're nodding your head. You're the only courageous one in here. No, yeah, it's true. You know what I say? I've been where you're at. I get what you're saying. You're a thinking person. I always tell them, you're a thinking person if you doubt the existence of God. You wonder about it. Huh? Because that's humans do that. We do that. We wonder about it. But every time I go back and I work through everything, there has to be a God. There's no other choice. There's no other option. You know? But that's where we start. We start at a point where we can agree on something. When you're talking to someone, find a place that you can agree with them. That's what we call negotiation. What you're doing is you're trying to negotiate for somebody's soul. I hope the lesson today has been helpful to you. I hope so. I want to give you the tools, as many tools as I can, to reach people for Christ, because that's what we need to do. This community needs us. This whole area, this whole central Illinois, all of us, in every corner we're in, they need us. They need us to show them the love of Christ, to show them what God has offered them, the free gift of salvation. That's what they need. So let's do it, all right? All right, God bless you.